life in 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisted. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest, my feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the pod. As always, before I dive in, please remember, if you haven't already, to like, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening, especially on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts. It really does help me out. Helps the show get found by other people. Helps quote-unquote ratings. So if you could do me a solid, if you haven't already, please remember to do that for me. Look, I just want to jump right in here. I've got a couple stories kind of under the topic of being a bully. All right, racially speaking, there's a lot to talk about here. And first, if you've been listening for a long time, you know that I don't put out an episode every day or even every other week or every week, sometimes not even every month. And part of that is because this is not my main source of income, really any source of income for the most part. But I also don't do that because I really value some nuance and conversation, and I don't know if you can always have that if you're responding to everything week by week. However, I do see value in doing that. Luckily, it's just me and occasionally or usually guests on here, and I got the freedom to kind of operate how I want to operate. Pros and cons, but the pro is that I think I can kind of pick and choose responsibly to you guys, the audience and the listeners, things that I want to give a gut reaction to, and then also pick and choose things that I want to have longer, extensive conversations about. So as you can see already, the title of this episode is something having to do with the bully. I think it's going to be how to defeat a bully. I've got some personal ties to some of the stories I'm going to bring up. But anyway, it's been a couple weeks since a couple of these things have happened. So I've had some time to process and think about it. I didn't even know if I was definitely going to do an episode on this, but I thought it was too on the nose, too on topic, and maybe even not quite in the mainstream news enough for everyone to have heard about. So I wanted to also be informative. Look, at the core of racism, I believe is being a bully. Now that's putting it extremely simplistically, but I think it's true. Let me start here. There was a story that, and I'm escaping, the location is escaping me already, but there was a story that happened. Actually, I don't know why I said that the location is escaping me, because it's not. It was right down the road from where I live in Virginia. But this was a couple weeks ago now, up in Northern Virginia, which is also where my wife is from, and where many of you are either listening from right now or are from. Many of you are very familiar with this area, but up in Northern Virginia, in a county called Loudoun County, just a couple weeks ago now. This was the end of April. Okay. A 5-year-old Asian boy was harassed with racial slurs by a middle schooler in Loudoun County, Virginia. This was filmed. The middle schooler, was filming himself, or other middle schoolers who were heard laughing in the background were filming this happening. So I'll just read some of the text from articles and posts. This is off of Rebel Yellow on Instagram. So a 5-year-old Asian boy was harassed with racial slurs by middle schoolers in Virginia. A preschooler in Loudoun, Virginia, was filmed being harassed with racial slurs by a middle school student earlier this month, prompting widespread concern in the community. The incident, which took place off campus, involved students from Eagle Ridge Middle School. So it took place, that's relevant, it took place off campus. So only so much could be done, or in this case, nothing really could be done by the school itself. In the video, the young boy clutches a blanket and pleads, don't hurt me," as an older child mocks him with comments like, "Are you having dumplings for dinner?" and compares him to King Kong. And laughter can be heard in the background. The footage was reportedly circulated among students in a group chat before a concerned parent alerted the boy's family. The boy's parents, who immigrated from China to pursue better opportunities, said they actually specifically chose Loudoun County for its reputation, for strong schools and safe communities. And now, of course, are heartbroken and questioning if this was a good idea. The father also responded saying, "Should we just keep lying and saying, oh, they're calling you King Kong because you're strong? Or should we try and explain to him what that word really means?" The family hopes speaking out will help other parents recognize the importance of teaching children about kindness and respect. Loudoun County Public Schools condemned the behavior and offered counseling to the victim. However, because the incident occurred off school property, off school property, officials said that their ability to discipline the student who made the video is very limited. All right, so look, a lot to unpack here. And as I've said throughout my time doing this podcast, I don't always recommend watching these videos, but I do ask that everyone acknowledge the importance of them, because I think it can be really and I didn't repost the video. I do think there is a conversation to be had and consideration to be had for how people use social media. I don't think it's necessarily always the best thing to put traumatic stuff out there just for people scrolling through to see it without really knowing that they're going to see it. But I do think it's important to acknowledge the importance of things like this being caught on camera. I think about what has been said over the last, at least 5 years. I can remember. I think I don't know why I remember Will Smith saying this, but I know other people have said it. But the fact that racism isn't happening more often now, it's just being videotaped, it's being caught on tape or recorded because of everyone's accessibility to iPhones and cell phones and whatnot. So I say all that because you can see this video for yourselves if you like. Everything I just read happened. It's in the video. I've seen it. One place, it's on Rebel Yellow, the Instagram handle on Instagram. You can see that. Scroll back to end of April. You can see this video happen. This kid's being chased by middle schoolers. He's 5 years old, running around outside his own house, people bullying him and hurling racial slurs at him. People laughing. Right? One thing I want to say is, and I believe for the most, I believe that as I know the audience I have, I think most of you listening want to help and are an empathetic listening community. But I also want to be cognizant of, even in you guys, I'm not saying I'm not above this either, and maybe the few of you that are listening to want to disagree, hate listen. I just want to say this. I think it can be easy to push back on something like this and say, well, this is just an isolated incident, or bullying happens all the time. Everyone's bullied. Racially speaking, I want to push back on that. Not that other bullying doesn't happen, not that everyone can't maybe identify in some way. I want to push back on that because that is a subtle gaslighting viewpoint, I think, with this. There's one thing to be bullied. There's another thing to have racial slurs hurled at you, and it's another thing to have racial slurs hurled at you by older kids, and it's another thing to have racial insults hurled at you as a 5-year-old at your home while being recorded. This is disgusting. I hope that if you're listening to me, no part of you is okay with this, and no part of you is trying to justify it or want more context. If that's you, I'd just encourage you to go ahead and watch the video. There's not really any context that I think would make this any better. And these are kids. Middle schoolers are kids. Appropriately, no names are released or anything like that. And I empathize with kids. I spend time on both sides of things growing up. I identify with this 5-year-old Asian kid being bullied. hearing racial slurs on the playground, in sporting events, in the classroom. I identify with that. I know all of my Asian friends would also identify with that. I'm not exaggerating. Ask around, ask your Asian friends if they heard racial slurs, similar, if not exactly this, from a young age on the playground in the classroom, or maybe they still do. I identify with this kid. My heart goes out to him. And I'm sure this wasn't also the first time. I also wonder why he's saying, save me, right? He's saying, that's the quote, save me, don't hurt me, don't hurt me. That I can only assume means that this has that this has happened before, right? That's all I can assume. And my heart goes out to him. Extremely troubling that this happened. And extremely troubling that it happened via older kids, more than one, having the audacity, the goal, put this around in a group chat to friends as if it's just for entertainment. I'm so thankful it wasn't worse. It didn't get physical. That the parents were able to get him inside. And I pray that the trauma is minimum. Maybe the silver lining is that he was only 5 and isn't quite aware as a kid would be who was a little bit older. This is terrible. And I say this because it can be really easy, I think, to hear this story and think that it's a one-off, think that not only is it an isolated incident, but that it's also, isolated because this stuff doesn't happen anymore. Which is why I just said, no, I'm almost 37 years old. This happened to me when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, right? In my 20s. Okay? In my 30s. Yeah, this happens. I'm going to mostly leave it there. I could go in a bunch of different directions with this. It brings up so many layers. But the theme of this short episode is being a bully. And within the same week, and this is the story that many of you may have heard, maybe not. But shortly after this was a little more mainstream and in the news. And I'm not sure which state this was in. But a woman named Shiloh Hendricks was on a playground, and a little young autistic black boy was started digging around in her purse. Little kid digging around her purse, and she had her own kid she's seen in the video, her own kid holding her. The kid looks to be 3-ish, 2-ish maybe, with her. Picks up her kid and starts calling this young little black boy the N-word over and over. Again, I say luckily, a bystander had the wherewithal to record this woman. And you would hope that Shiloh Hendricks would have had at least a deer in the headlights response and backed down, gotten out of there quickly. But no. Instead, she doubled down, kept saying it. Yeah, I said it. Kept calling him the N-word. Said that's something to the fact that that's what he is. And flicked off the guy recording her and stood there with her full chest, holding her own child, continuing to double down and saying this. Now, that was troubling enough, but this is textbook bully behavior. One, she felt emboldened and safe to be able to do that for God knows why. But then, what's the textbook characteristic of a bully? Not being able to deal with people that stand up to you, and not being able to deal with the consequences of you being a bully. What proceeded to happen is she started to, of course, this person recorded her. It went viral. People heard about it. and people are rightfully pissed off, right? So what proceeded to happen is she goes to the website Give, Send, Go. So not to be confused with GoFundMe. I'm not trying to lift GoFundMe up or anything like that, but I think that's important because what I believe happened is a GoFundMe wouldn't I don't believe have signed off on this happening, but she goes to a website called Give, Send, Go, which, as I read about it, says it's a Christian platform. So it's like a GoFundMe, but it's called Give, Send, Go, and proceeded to do a crowdfunding initiative for herself to relocate her home because she was being attacked. Now, I'm not saying this because I wish physical harm on this person, on Miss Hendricks. I'm not encouraging anyone to go harm anybody. But what is deeply troubling about this is that she goes to this, I'm doing air quotes if you're not watching the video, Christian platform to raise money so that she can take shelter from being held accountable using the N-word on a little child. When I say she raised money, I think her initial goal was about 50,000, which is a lot, right? She ended up raising upwards of $600,000 through Give, Send, Go. Now, there's been a lot of back and forth. There's been people trying to make sure she doesn't actually cash out the money and get the money. So I don't know what has happened with that, but through the platform, she raised upwards of over $600,000. Jacob Wells, the CEO of Give, Send, Go, naturally came to the defense of Shiloh Hendricks, not necessarily what she did. He says he condemns, what she said, but that the First Amendment, freedom of speech, gives Americans right to express themselves, and so she's and it believes that that's a strong argument against cancel culture. So she is owed and deserves the money she raised. Guys, just what a disgusting response. Just what a what a terrible, inhuman response. Inhuman. Just disgusting. That the First Amendment gives Americans the right to express themselves, something he believes is a strong argument against cancel culture. Guys, there's laws against hate crimes, right? There's laws against hate crimes. This is, if you're watching, sorry, my light's going out. If you're watching, this is just craziness, y'all. Absolute craziness. But I digress, and I wanted to point this out because this is not abnormal. It's not even abnormal with things I've talked about here on the podcast. Daniel Penny, who choked Jordan Neely to death on a subway, got similar support. Right wingers financially putting together money to support him and his causes. Kyle Rittenhouse, the young, I think 15-year-old, 16-year-old who shot and killed a BLM protester, was heralded and ushered in right-wing conservative spaces and touted as a hero. A hero. So my question is, I thought these people who are raising this money, I thought these are the same people that are worried about the price of groceries, the price of eggs. But when it's time to support and uphold people that are literally killing, hating, and harming Black and brown people, we can come up with millions of dollars on the spot for that. We'll protect those people. That's what we're about. We'll find the money. Look, I think these two stories are horrible because they have to do with kids. But racially speaking, there's so many things that I've read about, stories I've followed, things I've brought up here on the podcast, things that my guests have brought up here on the podcast just ring true in these two stories. This kind of thing's not new. It's not new. Certain types of people with certain ideologies feel emboldened, right? I think boys are often emboldened. They're not created a lot of times. That's what emboldening is, right? And for this episode, I'm going to stay away mostly from the political agenda. Not that I have one, but I know I can often, I don't want to make this all about hating on the current administration. But I will say there's a direct tie with even specifically these crowd-funded initiatives. And our current president and many of the leaders are the ones that chime in support of these people. They've hijacked things like woke culture or cancel culture, BLM. They've hijacked all these things to instill fear that America is going to hell in a handbasket because so much awareness about racism has been raised over the last however long, 5 to 7 to 10 years. And we need to be wary of that. On this small, tiny platform that I have on this podcast, I'll continue to speak into that. Look, even more specifically, just think about things you've given money to. Think about what it takes. What's the X factor? There's always an X factor. Like, you have to believe in something to give money to it, even at a small degree. People swiping their credit cards, writing checks, protect people committing racial hate crimes instead of protecting the disenfranchised people in these incidences is a real sad thing. It's a real sad reality. And I think we got to be cognizant of it. I think at a personal level, a lot of teachers listen to this podcast. I've had a lot of teachers on this podcast, and a lot of parents listen to this podcast. Have conversations, model empathy for your young kids, be intentional. And I can't help but think of John Lewis. I'm not telling anyone to go out and lose their job, but the late John Lewis, what do you always say? Get into good trouble, right? Get into good trouble. And that might just be having to deal with some awkwardness because you're standing up for what's right. Doesn't mean you have to get rolled or handcuffed and taken to jail. Don't let bullies be emboldened. Okay? Don't let bullies be emboldened. All right. That's all I got today. Thank you guys for listening. I hope we'll be back with a longer form episode next time with a guest or two. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts. If you're watching, sorry, there's no music. If you're listening, the music you're listening to is done by our guy, Dylan Dent. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.
In 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisted. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest, my feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure. The nightmare might scare you, no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than company.